first session up this morning is regarding two newbies to Parliament House. While we've got the ministers attending later on, we thought it was really important to start getting to understand the new parliamentarians. There are a huge number of new parliamentarians in this parliament, and we thought it was a good opportunity to really get to know their reasons for putting their hand up to be a politician, and get to understand about what is important to them in their electorates, and particularly in relation to building and construction. So we have like to introduce you to our two panellists. Phillip Thompson, OAM MP, member for Herbert in Queensland. Phillip served in the Defence Forces, including East Timor and Afghanistan. He was unfortunately wounded in action, resulting in severe injuries and a brain injury. And since leaving the Defence Force, Phillip has worked in mental wellbeing and suicide prevention organisations, including being named in 2018 as the Queensland Young Australian of the Year, and has been awarded the Order of Australia for his welfare work for war veterans. I'd like to acknowledge in today's issue around mental wellbeing that it is World Suicide Prevention Day, and unfortunately, building and construction industry has one of the highest rates of suicide, and Master Builders is fortunate to work with organisations such as Mates in Construction and also AusHelp as we tackle mental health wellbeing in our industry and the community at large. Julian Simmonds is our next panel speaker. He's the member for Ryan, also in Queenslanders. We've been taken over from Queensland, but obviously there were some significant shifts in Queensland during the election. He has a background in journalism and has been a councillor of the Brisbane City Council for 9 years prior to entering into federal parliament. If you could please welcome both Julian and Phillip. Thank you. So first of all, to you, Phillip, give us a bit of understanding about what motivated you to go into politics. Some of us might think you're slightly, mad to do that because of the 24/7 cycle of being a politician. But what was your inspiration?
Well, thank you for having me. I have some notes, and I'm not going to read from them. I think it's much better to just speak frankly from the heart until we need numbers. But I'd like to start by acknowledging anyone in the room who's been affected by mental health, mental illness, or being bereaved by suicide, with today being World Suicide Prevention Day. And I think that it's extremely important that we have that conversation, and we always feel like we can talk. And I think in a week it's Are You OK Day, and it's another day where we need to be asking everyone how we're tracking to make sure that we're all safe, whether it's in the Defence Force or whether it's on a construction site, and we all come back from our workplace. So politics, it's a very interesting question. I saw lack of leadership in Herbert and Townsville. I saw people making excuses instead of getting on with the job, and I felt like we weren't represented well in North Queensland. And I thought, instead of lobbing stones, asking how can I help, let's do something to work together, because no one was catching any. I thought, why don't I put my hand up and actually catch some stones and represent the people and be the people's member, not Canberra's voice in Townsville. I want to be, and I am, Townsville's voice in Canberra. You're having a few ministers and the Prime Minister a little bit later. I'm sure if you ask them who bangs on their door all the time, they'll say me, and I'll definitely wear out my welcome. But that's my job. My job is to represent the people of Herbert. And the people that inspire me are, well, to be honest, my friends that were either killed or injured overseas and who have died back here by suicide. Because I want every person to be able to have a future. I want every person to live their life well. And as well as that, I have a 16-month-old baby girl, and I want her to have a future in Townsville. And we've had such high unemployment that our young people, when they finish school, they go to uni, they leave to the southeast corner. And no offence to Julian, but I want to keep my people in Herbert. because our city is amazing and we need someone that really backs in projects and backs in, any industry that creates jobs and economic drivers, which it means getting out of your way so you can do your job. My job's to get out of your way, create the environment and get out of the way.
Thanks, Bill. Julian, you obviously had 9 years as a councillor, so you weren't a novice to politics, but you still were inspired to then step up and do the federal thing. What was your motivating driver?
Thanks, Danita, and thank you all for having us along. We recognise we're the two warm-up acts for the heavy hitters, so we'll try and tell some jokes. In fact, not only are we both Queenslanders, but Phil and I are both roommates down here, so if the hot mics picked up a conversation before about this morning's shower, it was a conversation about who used all the hot water and how we work our new apartment. But, my passion is obviously my community. I've been in a local councillor for 9 years in the largest local government in Australia. I spent 4 years as the city treasurer, and I spent 2 years heading up the planning and development committee. So there was a number of passions for my community that I wanted to take to the federal level that I worked on a little bit in council. I know how important it is to have a livable city, to have livable suburbs. That means being connected. That means having good quality building product and diversity of product. So first of all, I spent the last 9 years fighting for infrastructure within the council, and I saw that we could do more. Brisbane City Council was doing a lot, but the state government wasn't doing a lot, and the federal government could do more. So getting federal funding for local infrastructure projects that improve the connectedness of my community was a big part of why I wanted to step up, and I'm very happy with some of the announcements we got during the election. And then, as I said, when I was working as the Planning and Development Chair, I had a couple of passions around promoting good design, around incentivising the industry to step up when it came to providing aged care and accessible housing for disability, and I saw the industry step up and the best of what the industry could achieve when they were incentivised and not weighed down with red tape and delays, and also diversity of product. So that's something where your local politicians can take a lead on. Things like getting older established suburbs and putting in townhouses, for example, can be contentious, but they also create a wonderful opportunity and diversity of product for example, younger people to move out of home and move into a townhouse and stay in the suburb that they love. I grew up in a small business family, so I know how important your industry is and how many small businesses are involved. And I've also seen some of the worst examples in the industry during my time as Planning and Development Chairman. I spoke to subbies. He was a shop fitter actually working on a job, a grown man in tears because it was his own business, and he was bullied off a site because he didn't have the union ticket. And that's something that we see and address at the federal level.
Talking about that union ticket, Phillip, when I last saw you, it was in the middle of the election campaign, and we saw firsthand some of the subcontractors with issues with the union around the stadium. How do you think you'd like to tackle some of the issues around not only infrastructure but also residential building, which is so incredibly important after the flooding? How are you going to tackle that as a federal MP from your local perspective?
Well, I think there's a few answers there. We've seen some absolute thuggish behaviour from the unions in the north, bullying behaviour, and I want to be very clear, I'm not anti-union. Not anti-union whatsoever, but I'm anti-bullying, I'm anti-thuggery, and if you want to pick on people, you can always come to my office, my door's always open, because the stuff that we've seen definitely at the stadium, where boxing in cars, yelling profanities at people and really trying to stand over contractors is disgusting and shouldn't happen. And as soon as it gets mentioned, you see the state Labor government put their head in the ground. They don't want to talk about it. They don't want to listen to it. You see contractors being very, nervous because they're not on they don't have the union blessing or the ticket, especially there. And I can tell you now that during the campaign, I'd be out the front. I'll put Facebook videos. I'll raise that issue with my colleagues and into the media, because doesn't matter where you are, doesn't matter who you are, doesn't matter if you're in the highest office in Townsville or if you at wherever you work, bullying's not acceptable. And I couldn't care less what shirt you wear or what brand it has on it. I won't be allowing it, and I'll be standing up for the people of Herbert and around the country who get bullied, and it's not right. When it comes to the flood, and panel builders who have to come up from down south and employ locals, sometimes that works well and sometimes that doesn't. Sometimes the contractors on the ground aren't getting the jobs in the rebuild. A lot of the time, and I've spoken to master builders in Townsville and Herbert. That was actually across the road from my office. And my question is, how can I help? How can we do this? How can we ensure local contractors get local jobs? And I'm continuing to speak with the people there and supporting the Master Builders Initiative. Townsville is doing it tough. We've got a lot of people still out of their homes. We had a massive monsoon and flood where one day I was going down a street in a boat, pulling people out of their houses, to the next day it's gone and the houses are condemned and they've had black water through it and things like that. But the one thing that I just can't stress enough is government is not there to put up roadblocks or get in your way. Government is not there to knock on master builders' door and say, how's this working? Why are you doing this? Why isn't this happening? I'm stopping, whatever. My job, Julian's job, the government's job, is to create a healthy environment for people to be employed, but to also get rid of the red tape so you can do your job properly. And then if you don't, that's when I come knocking and go, why is this happening? How can we work together to fix it? But I can't stress enough that master builders in Townsville and the contractors in Townsville, they do come to me and they tell me exactly what they're doing in their plan. There's an open transparency. There's not a locked door process that we have seen from my predecessors. I don't need to know all your business. I just want to make sure that local people get local jobs and the people of Townsville get supported the best they can.
Julian, obviously with your experience as a local councillor, but now also dealing with federal government, some of the frustrations in the building industry is a lack of coordination between all levels of government. How do you think, particularly if you look at your own electorate and particularly some of the housing demands that are required, how would you like to tackle it, and how do we work with people like yourself in trying to resolve some of those issues around capacity and supply and so forth?
Look, it's a really good question. It can be frustrating. I've seen the frustrations firsthand when I was in local council. So we would do a lot of work in order to get the industry moving. We know that time is money in your industry, particularly when you're trying to respond to the market and get a product to market quickly. And we would do a lot of work around, for example, reducing the approval timeframes or reducing red tape, because we know approvals is just one step in your process, but for a council officer who's doing the approval, that's their entire world. So they only see that part of it, and you've got to try and factor it in. We do a lot of work on that, and then all of a sudden, the state government, for example, would, as the Labor state government did in Queensland, come in and introduce, say, the foreign buyers tax, and all of a sudden, a lot of that work would be undone because the market would change again. So it's vitally important that you're communicating with all levels of government. We're communicating with each other, of course, but communicating with all levels of government about how the market is changing, how you're seeing the market changing on the ground, and what you need to do to respond to it. For example, if the one-bedders aren't selling anymore and you need to move into the townhouse space, then government has to move quickly to look at how we can facilitate that and change the regulations. So just keep an open communication. I think the South East Queensland City deal is a real opportunity for all three levels of government to work together, because it's not just about infrastructure, which is important to your industry, but it's also about how we get the economy moving and consumer growth up. So that is an opportunity, particularly in Queensland, for you all to feed in, and there's other city deal opportunities around the country too.
Thanks. Question to both of you. Phil, you might want to go first. The expectation of turning up to Canberra, obviously you've talked about living issues, and we don't need to know necessarily about bathroom sharing, but sitting in the chamber for the first time, doing your maiden speech, how did that feel, and what were your expectations, and has it been a shock, or is it as what you expected?
I think, and I want to be clear, I don't enjoy coming to Canberra. I enjoy being in Townsville. I don't enjoy the weather here. It is too cold. I don't enjoy buying an extra suit because I only had one. I had two, but I only had one when I came down because I spilt red wine on the first one. I think that, being in the chamber the first time is surreal. I gave the first maiden speech, which, I kind of felt the pressure of that because I don't just want to represent my constituents well. I want to represent my family well. I want to represent my veteran community well. My friends that I spoke about in there that have been killed or died, I want to represent their name well. And then I want to represent my colleagues well. So it was an interesting time, sitting in the chair for the first time and then speaking. I did enjoy it. I've never spoken for 20 minutes before in one go, so that was a little bit unique for me, and I'm not as nicely polished as Julian. He's been doing this a lot longer than I have. That's the nicest thing I've said to him.
I don't believe you've never spoken for 20 minutes, mate.
But I feel not pressure, but I feel a responsibility every time I'm in Canberra to represent my people every second I'm here. So we do big days. We have a lot of meetings, but I just feel like I didn't put my hand up for the Phillip Thompson show. I put my hand up to represent my electorate, my community, and to back them in at every second. Which includes, doesn't matter what colour shirt you wear. If it's a good idea, it's a good idea. I really think that all local, all members, and definitely Julian's the same, and all our mates, we all represent our areas very well. And so every time we're here, it's not sitting back thinking about, what function you're going to go to. It's about sitting down going, what's the issues in my area? Who do I need to knock on the door? I've just had 9 ministers in Townsville in the last 2 weeks, and it's not because Townsville's great or I'm handsome. It's because I bang in the door. And I'm like, I need you to come to Townsville because I need you to see what's happening on the ground. And I want you to talk to my people, constituents, because they deserve their pound of flesh of their ministers. While I'll beat the drum there, I want to take ministers and the PM and everyone so our community can say whatever they want, and whatever their issues are. So then it's not just my voice, it's our voice. And that's how I think that I'll represent my people, and that's what I'll be doing here.
Julian, obviously the chamber up there is a little bit different from a council chamber. How did you feel when you first went in?
Oh, obviously, it's an incredible privilege. It was certainly a moment I'll remember giving my first speech and having the Prime Minister and the ministers there and all of my colleagues there to hear a little bit about my story and what I'm all about. I think Phil summed it up incredibly well. We're here for our communities and we try and work every day to take the most of our opportunities. The only thing I'd add is that what I've been impressed with coming from council to the federal government is just how much opportunity there is and how much involvement there is from the executive level to get the backbench involved. We do have the opportunity to give input into policy, a lot more than I thought would be the case. So if you do have issues, feel free to bring them to members of the backbench and we can feed them in and take up the cause. And then the other thing is there is just so many competing priorities. So, given we're all locked in the building, there's always about 3 things going on at once, and you're continually feeling like you're arriving to everything late and leaving everything early. So if we ever do that to you, I sincerely apologise. So you've got to really be careful about focusing your attention, and you can help us do that by, if you have a burning issue, by getting in our face and coming to see us and knocking on the door.
You did hear it here first. Any issue in Australia, Julian Simmonds.
No. Can I just say, I think you've made a really important point that we as advocates sometimes overlook, and that is that the backbenchers are a great resource to talk to, that the ministers are extraordinarily busy, and the backbenchers do have the capacity, particularly in the party room, to be vocal, and I'm sure many of you are. And it is very important that we continue to have that relationship with all members of Parliament, regardless of their position or their party, that we are advocating our messages to all parliamentarians. I think it's very important.
Just to give you an idea, when we left to come and do this forum, Phil and I, party room was going into its second hour, so we left that to come here. But that's just an example of the opportunity that we get to input into these draft bills.
Don't tell ScoMo.
I'm glad you got a leave pass. In fact, I am shocked that the bells haven't gone yet, because last year when we held this event, the bells did not stop. So I'm touching wood that's still going to be the case. The class of 2019 is large, and for those who don't know, there is this term called the class of, and it is where all of the new MPs and senators get together regardless of their party and very much support each other, and occasionally have social events. Is that been the case for this year?
Some of the classes not only have their own social events, they have their own logos, they have their own letterhead, they have their own mottos. So if there's any more of an in-joke than that in Parliament House, I'm not sure what it is. But the classes tend to stay incredibly close. It's a shared bond. I know that Scott Morrison's class, for example, meets regularly, as does our class. But it's an incredibly talented class coming through this year. You've got Phil with his extensive experience. You've got people like Dave Sharma and James Stevens and others from South Australia, and good people like Gavin from Tasmania. And if you had the opportunity, and I'm sure you wouldn't, but if you get the opportunity to Google some of the main speeches from the class, it's just such an incredible diversity of experience that I know that no matter what your interest or your policy focus is, you will find somebody in that class of whatever it is, 25, 26, 27, who will have a shared experience, who will be willing to take up an issue for you.
Absolutely. There's obviously 3 years of your term. There's an awful lot happening in your electorates. You can't necessarily solve every problem. Julian, for you, what are the priorities for Ryan, for you, in terms of the next 3 years?
For my area, it's infrastructure. So for those who don't know, I represent the western suburbs of Brisbane. It is a beautiful place to live, but like all beautiful places, people want to move there and live there, which is great because it's strong for the economy and it builds the community. But infrastructure is what drives people mad and it not keeping pace with growth. And it's not infrastructure for infrastructure's sake. It's about getting people home to their families sooner and safer. It's about allowing them to spend less time with pent-up frustration in the car and more time moving around their community, going to sports and all the rest of it. So I've spent a lot of time securing federal funds, and I'm sure I will spend more time securing federal funds for local infrastructure in my area, so that we can continue to cater for that growth and keep the lifestyle that we've become accustomed to. And the other thing, as I said, was my area's got an ageing population, and creating housing and housing diversity, both dedicated aged care and retirement stock, but also this idea of accessible housing that is fitted out, whether it be with, slightly bigger doorways or slightly bigger bathrooms, that kind of thing, so that people can age in place in their homes, because with this ageing population, the people going into dedicated aged care is just a very small part. We need to keep more people ageing in their homes, and that means accessible housing products. So continuing to work with the Brisbane City Council to achieve those type of things for my area.
Phil?
My number one goal is to deliver all our commitments that we announced during the campaign in a timely manner, and I'm working with local leaders in Townsville, so it's not me coming up and saying this is what we're doing when we're doing. We're working together to set the priorities for the city, and we're going to deliver all those projects in the term, and then backing in, other projects that creates jobs. That's what we need. We have high unemployment. We also have high crime. But my big passion is jobs. My big passion is getting people into the workforce, which includes mining, which includes construction. It includes everything. I couldn't care less what the job is. If it creates jobs, and I want them in Townsville. And we've got Adani's head office in Townsville. That's great. I want to see more head offices in Townsville. I want to see they have 200 employees there. I love that. I like that people are picking Townsville, and I know Julian said Ryan's a great place to live. It has nothing.
I think I said it's the best.
It has nothing on Townsville. Has absolutely nothing on Townsville. You know, in winter, it's like 29 degrees. It's lovely. It's always beautiful. Except if you have a flood or it has a cyclone, but they're risks that you take to live in a beautiful place. But then we back in the area. So my main focus is employment. My main focus is employment. It was water security, and we've delivered long-term water security through the stage 2 of the pipeline. So whatever projects create jobs and economic drivers, you have my support. I don't care if it comes from anyone in this room or if it comes from someone, dare I say, from the Greens. They don't have much buy-in on this, but if they did, we back it in. And we're not, despite what everyone thinks, in Townsville, we back the resource sector. With coal, we back wind, we back solar, we back it all in. It's a blended model. Townsville does do it tough. We don't have competition in our energy market, which does hurt us. Our energy prices are extremely high. So cost of living also is something that's a big passion of mine. I'm working with the Minister on that, and hopefully when the Queensland State government changes next year, we will get competition in the north. We have high crime. When the state government changes next year, we will get a dedicated police helicopter because we need that. So we have a lot of things in our project pipeline, but it's about our community and our community leaders coming together to be the driving force, because like I said before, it's not a me thing. It's how the community and how our business leaders and our leaders within that come forward and drive. Government isn't to be in your way. Our job is not to get in your way. Our job is to get rid of the red tape where we can and to allow you to do your job and do your job well.
One final question about the election, because we've been swapping a lot of election stories this morning in some of our earlier panel sessions. What were some of the standouts from the election campaigning itself? It's a pretty intense process, the election campaign. You know, some people talk about wearing out 4 pairs of shoes when they're constantly door knocking, they're getting hit by media. What were the issues that stood out from you, from your experiences?
My volunteers stood out. Like I said in my maiden speech, a lot of people say every campaign needs. Every campaign in my electorate and my campaign was everyone needs a Casey Scott, a Michael Brennan, a Dino, a Laura, a Mari, because these people are out every day just because they just backed me so much and backed in the party and really thought, all these polls and everyone on TV and all these commentators and news reporters saying how, the Liberal National Party, you got no chance, you're never going to do anything, you're not going to win, you might as well just give up. Well, I can tell you now, that's not the feeling on the ground, and that's not the feeling from the supporters. And, we never took it for granted, but we worked very hard. My daughter had her first birthday on pre-poll, and she came out, during the pre-poll talking. She wasn't talking, I was talking to people. And you can actually, you don't get yelled at if you have a baby. So I didn't get yelled at, but it was, my wife was out every day with me, door knocking, campaigning. And the media's the media. They want to get a grab from you. They also want to hear what's happening in Canberra and what I'm going to talk about about Canberra and Townsville. And I can tell you now, it's not how we do it in the north. We talk about our local issues. If they want to talk about what's happening in Canberra, then they can call their press gallery and get them to ask a minister. So I think the standouts were the volunteers and the hard work everyone put in. Labor didn't lose the election. We won the election.
Speaking of my son is the same age as Phil's daughter. So he spent more of his life in a campaign than out of a campaign in his short life. So you don't see a lot of your family. But Phil's absolutely right. the election, because of the way that it went, will be analysed within an inch of its life. But I can tell you, as somebody who's on the ground, as Phil could, talking to people over and over again, it was really simple. People just wanted stability and consistency, and they were nervous as heck about what the Labor Party were proposing in terms of this tax and spend agenda. The idea that you could double capital gains tax and remove negative gearing and not have people suddenly get very nervous and stop spending their money just didn't make sense to them. And so they knew all along, or for a long time, and we were getting that feedback on the ground, was that they were just saying, stay the course. We understand your plan. We understand your plan to keep the economy strong. We don't understand how taxing us more is going to help the economy and help our everyday lives. And we stuck to that plan.
Thank you. And can I just say that's a great segue into our next speaker, who I understand has just turned up, which is the Treasurer. I don't need to do an introduction.
Are you trying to kick us off because the Treasurer is here?
I hate to tell you, I am kicking you off because the Treasurer is here, I think.
2 minutes. Told. 2 minutes.
Just stall for 2 minutes.
Stall us for 2 minutes. So is that right, guys? I'm looking at people up there.
Yeah, 2 minutes.
2 minutes, thank you. All right, quick wrap up then in 45 seconds each, then I can thank you.
You go first, Julian, so I can see how it's done.
Well, no, 45 seconds. Just thank you very much for having us along. Thank you for coming and engaging as an industry. Remember that I find that particularly those industries that are most effective, and I'm conscious, you've got over 4,300 people employed in the construction industry in my electorate alone, that you've got over 1,600 small businesses involved in your industry alone in my electorate, so it's important to all of us local members. So the most effective industry groups that I see are ones that are willing to pin their colours to the mast sometimes and take on issues and be vocal about it and get members involved in the issues that they need to be vocal on. And I would simply encourage you not to be on the sidelines if you've got an issue, and play a role.
Thank you. Phil?
Sorry.
Are we okay?
Yeah, we've got 15 minutes.
Oh, excellent. Lucky the Treasurer's up there. I agree with everything Julian said, but I'd like to add that I'm very humbled to be here. This is something that needs to continually happen. That engagement and hearing from members that represent you. We have over 13,000 small and medium businesses in Townsville, and they're the engine room of the economy. And I think that I know I keep hammering home on it, but I truly believe that our job is not to stop you, it's to help you and get out of your way. And, Julian said it very eloquently. There is a time when you need to fly the flag and you need to beat the drum, you need to stand up for your industry. And, you need to stand up for the right thing, and you don't want to sit on the fence your whole life and get splinters in your backside. There's a time where you need to stand up and be counted. And, we have seen that in the building industry of late, and that's what you'll get from us. You won't get fence sitting, you won't get sidestepping. If you come to us with a problem within your industry or any other industry, we will take a stand and represent you the best way we can to the executive, to the Treasurer, to the Prime Minister, to everyone, because that's our role. Our role is to fight for you.
Thank you. And can I just reiterate that message that I've been a lobbyist now for 25 years, and I remember one very learned MP saying to me, "Danita, you keep on rabbiting on about a particular issue, but I never hear any of my constituents talking about it." And so it's incredibly important that in the issues that we're fighting on your behalf, that they're not just hearing about it in Canberra, but actually where it really gets resonance is at the local community. So we need to be voice to be heard in every single electorate around the country, to talk to people like Julian and to Phillip in understanding what is happening on the ground. And that enables us to do our job that much better on your behalf in Canberra, that we're all focusing on those key issues, we're telling those stories, and we're advocating our case. So thank you for that message, very much appreciate it. Thank you for your time today. Good luck for the next couple of sitting weeks. I hope you can get back to your children and certainly enjoy the next 3 years at least. So thank you very much.
Thanks,
Thank you for having me.